Get out! Welcome to Get Fact.
Hello again.
Hello again.
How are you doing?
I'm not too bad.
So this one's a bit of a weird one today, isn't it? Because you've already pre-recorded your little chat
I did.
when you was on your own,
Yes.
and this is the pre-recording for it.
It is.
Yeah. So the week you recorded last week.
Oh, don't,
We always do
please,
this,
just
don't we?
don't,
Yeah.
just don't do.
Yeah, the time lapse. Yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna do a little recording from today. And the only issue I've got about this is we're actually recording on my phone, and I've got all my things wrote down on my phone for what we're going to talk about today. So that's a good start, yeah?
What is the purpose of recording on your phone?
I just want to see how it works.
Okay,
See if it, is a good recording. Does it move?
it's not moved yet.
It's not moving, has it?
Basically, what it is Steve's just bought himself a really high-tech, posh-looking gimbal or Steadicam
AI.
holder, and he's got it propped in front of us, and it's not really doing anything other than just sat there.
Yeah. It's just sitting there, not moving. It's supposed to be AI, it's supposed to follow you and stuff. I've not looked into it yet, though.
But we're not moving from where we're sat. So.
Yeah, that's true. I've just moved, but... Huh? So, how are you today?
I'm good. A bit tired today because I've got a day off.
Oh, yeah. It's always the case, isn't it?
Well, she got up this morning and went to work, which kind of woke me up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I fell back to sleep. And then I looked at my clock and it's like, oh, geez, I've got to get up. I've stuff to do.
Yeah. It's always on your day off. Are you tired, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that's what they say a day off's for, isn't it? They say your day off is for resting. You're not supposed to work, are you, on your day off?
No, when you've got partners, you have to work still.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's... they say on your contract, don't they? Like, days off, you're not allowed to work in any other job.
Yeah.
Because it's for day of rest.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's day of what I want to do with my day, isn't it?
Exactly. Whatever you want to do.
They should get rid of that out of the contract. It's ridiculous.
They're not contracted to your personal life.
Exactly. It's cheeky, that. So, yeah. Also, I've been speaking to Dan. I believe that he's going to be coming back on. I did mention the episode 27. I'll keep going on about episode 27 is the episode where it means we're going to carry on podcasting forever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a celebration episode. And, yeah, I think he'll be coming on for that. I've actually secretly recorded him last night. But I ended up telling him. But there's a little recording here. See if it plays. Here we go. See if this is recorded now.
This is recorded.
It is now, yeah.
All right.
I just want to see if it records your voice.
I've got what I sound like,
Right.
so at least I can't hear myself back.
Yeah. Well, with this
Not
new
too
setup, there's no delay in the talking.
There's no delay.
No.
No delay at all. Oh, okay.
So it's in real time, so you can hear yourself, but it's how you'd hear yourself in real life. Like just
Okay, so
talking.
it's normal as well.
Yeah, it's
So
wow better.
you don't mess up stuttering all the time.
Well, you don't know.
Oh, okay.
Wow better.
So you're making me want to come down and test it.
Yeah, you have to.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, could do. Come back on another episode. Special guest,
Yeah.
Dan.
Exactly. Well, I've already planned this. When you come back, you're in Nazi's
I know.
too.
Pianist too.
Yep.
Revenge of the Dan.
And I feel like you need to do it in 2 episodes' time.
Why?
Because earlier on I explained to you that 27 episodes means you'll stick to it. And we'll be on episode 27.
Oh, really?
So it's like a big celebration episode.
Episode 27 is the celebration episode.
Because that means you've made it.
Okay. Right, okay. I'll be on episode 27 then.
Just recorded 25, so...
Okay, so you're recording 26 when?
Don't know yet.
Alright.
But we're like 2 episodes ahead at the minute. So yeah. Little conversation he had with him. Did you hear him there? He said, I will be on episode 27.
That's in it now. It's official.
It's recorded, yeah.
It's recorded. It's
You
official.
can't let us down now.
Can't get out of that one now.
Nope. It's signed, sealed, delivered.
Signed, sealed, and delivered. Come on, Dan.
Yeah. So yeah, he'll be on episode 27
So
as
Dan-
our guest.
So Dan will be coming in your ears.
Yeah. I'm sure he's got a lot to talk about. What do you reckon he's bringing with him?
If it's anything like Dan's last episodes, probably nothing.
Maybe.
I'll speak to him and say, you've got to bring something.
Yeah, you've got to bring something to do with Nazis. Definitely.
We're making this out to be like Nazi supporters, you know?
Yeah. Das Einenswagen. Well, I was actually looking for patterns, you know, where I've put this soundproofing up.
Yeah.
And the pattern I made at wall, I thought, Jesus Christ, I've made the Nazi flag.
Swastika.
I can't put that on wall at back of us. Nazi pattern. Jesus Christ. I'll stop that so I can get all my stuff off my phone. I'm sure that's done all right. Yeah, I've got a few bits for you. Not much, because it's not been long, has it? When did we last record? 2 days ago.
About 2 days ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, yeah. Did you hear about the male gorilla that gave birth in the zoo? Straight in with that one.
Straight in. Yeah. Where's Dan when you need him?
Yeah. So what do you think of that?
No, I've not heard about that one.
So, what it is...
I'm looking forward to this.
In Ohio, in the zoo...
Oh, in America,
they had a gorilla in there that they believed for 4 years to be male until it suddenly gave birth. Why are they not looking at his genitalia?
Exactly.
For 4 years. How many visitors has gone in and said, that's not a female?
What qualification has the vet got that works there?
What's going on there? Surely you can see a gorilla's bits.
Well, I'm sure there's distinct recognition. Visually, you can see what the difference is between a male and female, surely.
Exactly. And Jack, I see his bits all the time, and he's not half as big as a gorilla. So, surely. Yeah, that's mental. Like, I don't know if you've not clicked on something.
Surely there's a difference between male and female gorillas.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like ChatGPT news one, that one. Straight up. Yep. But it's not. I've not actually prepared any ChatGPT. I'll have to pause this and get some in a bit. Part of the episode, isn't it? Yeah. Have you ever heard of the broken window theory experiment?
Can't say that I have.
No.
I've broken windows, but...
No, well, it's a bit creepy, this one. I'd love to, have a description to read it out instead, but I'll try and wing it and get it all wrong.
Go on.
So...
Looking forward to this.
There's a theory that if you break a window, if said there's a big window with 8 different squares on it.
Yep.
If somebody breaks one of them windows, then people will walk past and continue to break the other ones. Following on. Smash the other one until all the windows are smashed.
Okay.
Because it's someone else has done it, so I might as well finish it.
Yep.
Type thing.
Yeah, very
so some woman a long time ago did an experiment where she chained herself up in a room and give permission for all the people in that room to do whatever they want to her. Signed, they could stab her, they didn't do anything.
Right.
And this experiment started off where she was just chained there and everyone was a bit curious going up to her, to tickle her or something like that, just setting off lightly. But eventually it got more and more aggressive because people started testing how far they could go.
Right.
And because one person was pinching her, I want to go like that, see, you know what I mean? It got worse and worse and worse. To the point where there was borderline stabbing her and stuff.
Oh my God.
And then he had to stop the experiment and say that is the broken window experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Never heard
That's
of that
weird,
one.
isn't it?
That's weird, that.
But that's how weird humans are. We're so easily led.
Yeah.
That if we see someone else doing it, we think, it must be all right.
Hats off to putting herself through that.
Yeah, but that's an experiment that's shown that humans are simple creatures.
Oh, yeah.
Look at that prime drink.
Prime drink?
Yeah, my son was forcing himself to drink it. Yeah, it's nice, yum. No, it's not. You can see that you're in pain drinking it.
Yeah, my daughter was the same. She wanted, because she saw a load of people doing it. One of her school fairs, they were doing this locked. There was a prime bottle locked in like a cabinet, little cabinet thing. Yeah. And you had to find the right key to open it.
Right.
If you found the key, obviously you got the bottle.
Yeah.
So we spent a fortune on my daughter trying to get this key.
It's horrible, isn't it?
So, we eventually got her one, and it was it's nice.
You can see it in the face, it's pretending it's nice.
I think I ended up finishing it off.
Is it? What was it? I've not tried it myself.
It was a blue one. I don't know what. I couldn't tell you what flavour.
Blue raspberry?
Probably. I don't know. It wasn't. It was too sweet.
Like
dead sweet.
Yeah, they all smell the same.
Yeah.
He's had 3 different ones, and he's pulling a face saying, yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I don't mind juice drinks, but that was just sweet.
Yeah. It's just all sugar, isn't it? But then...
Well, it was sugar-free. It's all the...
Sugar-free?
It's all the artificial stuff,
Oh,
isn't it?
yeah, artificials. The cancer stuff.
Yeah.
But that's what put him off it now. He doesn't drink them because he said, I've read a video... Well, I watched a video online, and apparently Prime gives you cancer.
Yeah, it's got aspartame.
I was like...
Which is...
I just don't want to tell him that everything gives you cancer. Because he's got off Prime, so he's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you cancer, stop drinking it.
Yeah.
So you've heard it here first, kids. Prime drinks gives you cancer. Get off it.
We're going to get sued now by Prime.
Good. That means they're listening.
Well, yeah. Sponsor us if you want.
Sponsored by Prime. Next week we'll be sponsored by Prime. 1 week slagging it off. Yeah, you know what he said?
We'll pay you X number of pounds to promote our service.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Sam.
Yeah, say. Prime.
Prime.
It's lovely. I love that sound effect you do. It's brilliant. It's almost as good as that fish one he had. Remember in that drink? You went, bloop. He said that you had a fish in your drink. Yeah. So you know how you're saying you're trying to win that Prime drink?
Yeah.
There's so many games that I know, like, you know, like in Hollywood Bowl and stuff, and they have all the machines.
Yeah.
Do you ever play the 2p machine?
Yeah.
Yeah, how good is
Well,
that?
even when we go to arcades anywhere, we just go on the 2p machines.
You literally
The one
win
where it
nothing.
slides in and out.
You win nothing, you're playing till you've lost all your money. Well, you're just winning for a keyring that you're not even going to use. It's a gimmick, innit?
Yeah.
It's like a little rubber keyring of, like, I don't know, like a cartoon character. You're like, I'm going to play with this 2p until I get
But
that.
it's when you get that big lot that falls out. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I can keep going.
The idea of winning is you can keep playing.
But they have similar ones with like 10p's.
Oh, yeah, that's rich
So I'm not
people.
going on. I'm not going on the 10p one. It's too much.
Yeah.
I'll stick to the 2p one.
It is if your money's gone quick there, isn't it? Who's rich enough to play that?
Or then you run out. You think, oh, you got a pound. Quick, go to the change machine. Quick.
I wonder if there's like a millionaire's version where they put like notes in.
Yeah, probably.
You know what I mean? A different version where a note goes in and it has to line up into a line. And if it falls into the line, you win more notes or something. You know what I mean? It's like a slot.
Can't imagine that.
Yeah. The millionaire's version. Billionaire's version. I won't like to see that. It's probably something to do with cars. You just push cars off.
A slot of gold bar into it.
Yeah, a load of gold bars on a pusher. You just drop more gold bars in to get some. Yeah, that's probably right, yeah. What other games do you like playing on when you go to like amusement parks and stuff like that? Is there any?
Not so much now. It was more when I was younger. I used to love going on the grabbing machines.
Oh, the grabbers are
until
good,
it
yeah.
worked out that they were fixed.
Yeah, it's probably took the fun out of it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So you're like, I might be the lucky 654th person here. Go on, one more pound.
I used to like going on the shooting games with the like a machine gun
Yeah.
that was attached to the thing, so you'd be shooting all zombies or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Which I kind of do that now with my daughter. We go on that one.
See, I went on one of them with Oliver, but he crapped himself 2 minutes in. As long as zombie game, no, jumped out. Jumped out at box. Okay,
Oh,
we're not playing this one then.
Or I don't know if you ever remember Hard Driving.
Hard driving.
Yeah, a long time ago. It was a Sega game.
Yeah, there's loads of different driving games, aren't there?
But it was called Hard Driving. You were in like a Ferrari.
Ah, right.
It was,
So is that Outrun? Remember
that was it. Outrun.
Outrun.
That was
Is
it.
that the one?
That was what I'm thinking of. There was another one called Hard Driving,
Right.
but it was Outrun that was the one I was thinking
Yeah,
of.
because that's the Ferrari car
Yeah,
that you
that was
sit
the
in.
one.
Yeah,
That was the one, yeah.
that was a good one. Yeah, there's a new one that's like Monopoly, and you just spin the wheel,
All right.
and it gets on a certain street, and you get so many tickets.
All right.
It's a fad that ticket thing, though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
You get like 1,200 tickets, you can get a flump. Brilliant! Just spent 80 quid on that.
You've got a boot full of tickets.
Yeah.
You can get 2 lollipops with that.
You know, it's about when people coming over, do you want them tickets? I don't want them. It's like 40 tickets. Like, what can I get with that? Looks like loads.
Can't even get a sweet.
Can't get nothing with that. Can't get a mile one with that.
But you see him though, where you see all the prizes, and you get like mobile phones and tablets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like 10,000 tickets.
Yeah. Then, yeah, mobile phones are. Yeah, all the devices cheap from China, aren't they? It's like proper rigged
Which by
up
the
things.
time you've got the 10,000 tickets or 20,000 tickets, it's out of date anyway.
Yeah. It's like I'm trying to think of like some designs you get. It's like in cheap portable speakers where knockoff versions are like JLB. It's like BLJ or something.
Yeah.
There's one that I used to love playing because it's about reactions, and it's like 4 blocks that go across, I think it is, and you stop it.
Yeah.
And then it goes on top, and you pile them up and up
Yeah.
and up and up.
Yeah.
And eventually you got one. Wait and see.
Yeah.
All that for queuing. But it's brilliant, that one. I love that one.
Oh, that for like Tamagotchi.
Yeah. Oh, Tamagotchi's a beast. £10 now, then.
Yeah, they're expensive now.
You can get cheap versions, but I'd want a proper one.
I used to have one years ago.
Yeah.
I think it only cost like £2.
I was going to get Dan one. I was going to get him a Yoda. Because he's a Star Wars fan. So,
that'd be good.
yeah, a little Yoda Tamagotchi. Right. I'm going to pause this and get some chat GPT news.
Okay, well...
2 minutes.
Should I say it?
What?
Cue the music.
Cue the music. A man in the UK has been fined for using a drone to fly a sausage roll to his friend's window during lockdown.
Great idea.
A woman in the US has been charged with arson after setting fire to her own home while trying to kill bedbugs with alcohol.
Oh my God.
A man in Australia has been fined for breaking lockdown rules after he was caught walking his pet goat. So these are all seem to be like lockdown news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you were allowed out
When?
during lockdown.
Was it?
Yeah, you were allowed out when you get an hour's exercise.
Right, but maybe goats were illegal. I don't know. A woman in the UK has been banned from keeping animals after she was found guilty of causing unnecessary suffering to her pet snake. I don't want to go there. It's not the same woman that married a pet snake.
I hope not. What's she been doing?
What's she been up to?
Well, she thought it was her husband, maybe.
Boldly goes where
Abusing
no
husband.
man's been before.
Abusing her husband.
Yeah. A man in the US has been arrested after he was caught trying to smuggle 35 live finches into the country by hiding them in his hair.
How big is
That's
her?
look good tonight. That's all for Chat GPT news. Over to you, Stu.
It's not too bad today. It's a bit cool, but I'm
Yep.
okay.
Yep. So let's go back to some of that news and talk about it. Right. So we'll start with the first one. The sausage roll guy. Like, was it worth it? Like, was it a homemade sausage roll that must have tasted really good and you wanted to share it with a friend?
I pretty much doubt it was a homemade sausage roll by the... How many people make sausage rolls?
What's the issue though with sending it in by drone? Apart from the contact to the drone and him.
Well, that's probably what it was, the contact
But
to the
how
sausage
can they
roll.
not prove that he's had gloves when he's handled this sausage roll?
This is it. It's
packed it?
ridiculous. He's
That
not
was a bit
exactly.
silly, wasn't it?
I don't think he's exactly broke lockdown rules.
No.
The lockdown rule was you do not go out or mix with other people.
Yeah.
And he wasn't mixing. He
Exactly.
just sent a drone instead.
Yeah. Exactly. That's probably the safest option at that
I
point,
would have
wasn't
thought
it?
so, yeah.
Yeah. Right, and the next one, we've already talked about the snake one. We don't want to go there.
We'll leave that one.
Yeah. The woman that married a snake and there's a woman getting done for manhandling a snake, basically. So, yeah. Let's link them together.
Conspiracy.
What was the other one? That last one?
Well, I mentioned one about the goat.
Oh, the goat. Yeah. That one.
Took his goat for a walk.
Yeah. That one, that's, again, not too bad, is it? Was you allowed to take your dog for a walk?
Yeah, you were allowed out for an hour.
But this is in Australia, isn't it? We don't know what the rules were
I
like.
know the rules were different because my sister lived in Australia.
Yeah. So if you're Australian and you know what lockdown was like, would you like to take your pet goat for a walk?
Because I know we were allowed out for an hour a day exercise.
Yeah.
But as long as you stayed away from people, and no more than, I think, 2, maybe 3 people in your group.
Right.
Like any household.
Oh, yeah, the bubble, they called
so
it.
you have the house bubble. So it's like you, your missus, and you got 1 or 2 kids.
Yeah.
Only they were allowed out
Right.
at that time, at once.
Okay. And the last one, I think it was, about finches in his hair. Well, that's like a Disney movie, isn't it? Like the next Up.
Well, first of all, it's like, it was either how small were the finches or how big was his hair?
Yeah. Well, he's clearly got an afro. So if they start flying, do you reckon he'll just take off?
Maybe he didn't have an afro. Maybe he had one of those 1960s beehives.
Yeah. Probably, yeah. Is it a finch? It is a bird,
finch
isn't
is
it?
a bird, yeah.
Yeah. So, how did he not fly away?
Maybe the size of a sparrow, maybe a little bit bigger.
Yeah. He must have tried to fly away, surely. That's got to be fake
Have to
news,
look into that a
one.
bit more.
Yeah, that can't be real, that one.
I don't know. How many?
Was it 30? Something like that. I can't remember, and he's just gone now. But yeah, it was a lot.
There's a lot of finches.
Yeah. Says that bollocks. Can't be true. Yeah, and that's all I've got. Right. yeah, that's all we can talk about for now because, we've got a guest coming up. I know this is a pre-record, but,
Yeah, I was on my lonesome.
Yeah, our recording here is with the lovely Stu and Dave from Liddypool, he calls himself. Is it Liddypool Dave?
Liddypool Dave or Dave Bedford, Beatles expert.
Yep.
Beatles historian, and he also runs his own private Beatles tours as well.
Ah, brilliant. Right.
And he also has his own podcast.
Does he?
Liddypod.
Right. Okay.
Which I've had a little listen to, and so it's quite interesting if you're a Beatles fan.
Right. Okay. And that's coming up next.
Cue the music.
Stay tuned.
And cue the music.
Yeah.
Now, yesterday and today, our theater's been jammed with newspapermen and hundreds of photographers from all over the nation, and these veterans agree with me that the city never has witnessed the excitement stirred.
Now, this fella from Liverpool who calls himself Liddypool Dave.
Now, tonight, you're going to twice be entertained by them. Right now, and again in the second half of our show. Ladies and gentlemen,
Dave Bedford.
That was a big introduction. I was waiting for the big build-up. Where was it? Okay, yeah. So Dave Bedford. I'm originally from the Dingle in Liverpool, but I emigrated from the Dingle to Penny Lane. I was about 3 miles, about 30 odd years ago. So for the last over 20 years, I've been a Beatles historian and author and documentary maker as well.
Oh wow!
And all kinds of stuff. So it's it gives me something to do.
So as a historian then, do you teach people or do you do tours or?
The answer is yes.
Oh, both.
Yeah, it's a bit of everything. So I started off by just interviewing as many people as I could who were connected with. It's the Beatles Liverpool story, the early years, which has always interested me.
Yeah.
Because I've grown up with it all around me. So interviewing people, which then led to writing my first book, which came out in 2009, called Liddypool, Birthplace of the Beatles, which is still the only major book just about the Beatles in Liverpool.
Right.
And I thought that would be it. Book published. I saw it on the bookshelf at Waterstones. I was happy. Oh, that was it. But it got a life of its own, and all these years later, it's taken me all over the world. I've now authored or co-authored 8 books about the Beatles. And done a documentary film all about the life of John Lennon as well. So, so I do a bit of everything, but I do Beatles tours as well. So that's been on and off for the last 20 years, been doing that. So we're right in the middle of the busiest time we've ever had. It's been absolutely crazy. This is my first day off in 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, next one's not enough for another 10 days or so. So you're lucky we got here eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been throwing a while now for dates and times, haven't we? So,
God, it's been crazy. Absolutely crazy. Yeah.
When you're doing your research, how do you approach it? Or is it kind of, do you go down an alleyway, there's a guy with a trench coat on who slips you an envelope? Or...
How did you know? Now, I started off, I thought, it's all sort of kicked off back in summer 2000. I started, my whole working life was in insurance, which is the bit that normally sends everybody to sleep. Sent me to sleep as well. But I got signed off work. I wasn't well back in the summer of 2000 and never went back to work. They eventually diagnosed a thing called fibromyalgia.
Yes, my mum has that.
Oh, well, yeah. So chronic painful condition. So I've been on a cocktail of tablets for over 20 years now. Right. Had to give up work at age 35. 3 young kids, mortgage and everything. Thought, what am I going to do next?
Yeah.
I'd always been a Beatles fan. I'd loved the music. I'd started playing guitar when I was young. So I'd always sort of got into it. And I went to the school that Ringo had gone to, St. Silas in the Dingle. Right. And then, as I say, we moved out here over 30 years ago, just off Penny Lane. And our 3 daughters were born same hospital as John, Oxford Street Maternity Hospital.
That's where I was born.
Yeah. I noticed after our 3rd daughter was born, they shut it, which I took as a hint. And then just because of where we lived, our nearest school was Dovedale, which is where John Lennon and George Harrison both attended.
Yeah.
So I sort of got involved, and we on like the Parents Association thing, and we were raising money for the playground. And we were looking for donations. And because of the Beatles connections, we reached out to see who would give us some money. And it was actually Yoko Ono who came back to us and said, how much do you need? And we needed about 26 grand. And he said, well, I'll give you 30. Wow. You know, do everything. Been over to the school a few times, made more donations, done lots of stuff. So as that coincided with me getting signed off work, I thought, that's a cool story. And it's a different side to Yoko. A lot of people know. So I ended up writing that for a Beatles magazine, and it just started from there. It was something to do. And my doctor actually encouraged me. It's good. He said, no, you've got to do something, because I used to play football. I played cricket. I played golf. That all went in like 18 months. And so it's one to keep the brain active. So with those connections at Dovedale, my wife and I organised a big open day, school reunion thing. We had about 600 people turned up. Wow. Going back decades and decades. But of course, there were a number of people there who'd been at school with Lennon and George Harrison. So I started collecting their stories. And then I thought, let me go and read a book on the Beatles in Liverpool and find out all these places. And there wasn't one. And so in a way, so I would say it's either my doctor prescribed the Beatles or it became my therapy. But that just became the thing for me to do, to go and find these stories. And because there wasn't a book there, and the books that we're writing about Liverpool, we're getting it wrong, which used to drive me mad. And I thought, these people have never even been to the city. And this is the city that made the Beatles. And if you don't understand Liverpool, and it's what I put in the front, if you don't understand Liverpool, you won't understand the Beatles.
Yeah.
And so I just went down the rabbit hole, and I got to one person, then another. And it just sort of became my little obsession, and just followed the evidence and interviewing so many people connected to the story. It was great.
Fantastic. I mean, I think that was a bit of a nice thing as well about Yoko Ono, because I think a lot of the time she was kind of portrayed as the bad person in the Beatles story, I suppose. But to see another side, I think that's a very good thing, really.
Yeah, and she's done a lot for Liverpool. You know, when John's Aunt Mimi's house came on the market, we thought the National Trust would buy it because they bought Paul's, but they wouldn't. So Yoko bought Mendip's and gave it to the National Trust.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, and of course we got the airport, John Lennon Airport. She always contributed to the biennial art exhibition. Did that fantastic exhibition down at the Museum of Liverpool a few years back, the Double Fantasy one. I mean, that won't appear anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
So she's always been very, very supportive. And so it's a different side to the Yoko that everybody thinks they know.
Yeah.
So it gives me something to do.
But so around, obviously, in the early beginnings of the Beatles, whether it was the Silver Beatles or Johnny and the Moondogs or something like that, what do you think it was out of all those bands that it was something picked the Beatles out? What do you think it was?
I think in the end, and why they survived, is because they could write their own songs.
Right.
Could they start as the Quarrymen in 1956? John meets Paul, July 57. Paul introduces George at the end of December 57. So you got the three of them together. And it's another 5 years before the first single comes out. So there was highs and lows in the story as he went through. So I think if some people think, they must have been lucky. They weren't lucky. They worked damn hard. Yeah. You know, when they go to Hamburg playing 6 or 8 hours every night for months on end, you either learn to be really, really good or you pack up when you go home.
Yeah.
And they learned to be really good. So Hamburg was their training ground. So when they came back from Hamburg that first time at the end of 1960, all the other groups were still doing, like in the suits and in the ties, and they were hired as dance groups. So their job was, we'll pay you money, you play the songs like the records, and everybody dances. Now, if you and I go to a concert these days, you go and you watch somebody perform, don't you?
Yeah.
That didn't happen back then. So that they were dance groups. So at this, the big turnaround was 27th of December 1960 up at Litherland at the town hall up there, which is now a health centre. They came back from Hamburg. So all the other groups, suits and ties, swinging guitars, looking good like the Shadows used to do. It was all very, very smart, everybody dancing. They come on the second half, Curtain goes up. They're in jeans, cowboy boots, leather jackets, long hair. Everything turned up loud. They launch into Long Tall Sally. People stop dancing and think, what the hell's that?
Yeah.
And they go to the stage and they watch a performance. That changes everything then. So what we're used to now, that's when it all changes. Went from being dance groups to performing. They'd learned in Hamburg how to perform to a crowd and how to get a crowd together and keep them there. So, of course, all the promoters saw that and think, we want some of that.
Right.
Because if they can do that, that's worth money to us. We can sell the tickets and we can make money from whatever else we sell. So they then became, the biggest group in Liverpool and Hamburg. That's what made the difference. So when you've got that working through, of course, the other thing, and we often joke about it, is, they played at the Cavern nearly 300 times in 2.5 years.
Right.
Which is a hell of an achievement. That's mainly because they were playing there quite often twice a day.
Yeah.
They were always available for lunchtime because they were allergic to getting proper jobs. Because all the other groups, the members, they worked during the day and played at night, but not the Beatles. So they were always available at lunchtime. Yeah. They played the lunchtime. Then they played wherever else around Liverpool. Then they come back to the Cavern again. So quite often they were playing 3 gigs every day.
Yeah, because you hear 1 or 2 stories that people who were working around there would pop out on the lunch breaks and go to the Cavern, have a Coke. Yeah,
exactly, Coke and a bowl of soup and a bread roll.
Right.
That was it. That's a funny story, I must tell you, because my mother-in-law, God rest her soul, she decided one lunchtime that's what she was going to do. Her and a friend. So they came out of work and she had this big beehive haircut. But of course, she did it the cheap way, which was like with sugar and water. I remember describing it. Well, of course, the Cavern was a death trap.
Yeah.
Right. So there's only one way in and out those stone steps. You get down there, there's sweat, there's toilets overflowing, there's cigarette smoke. It was horrible. It was a fire hazard.
Well, it was just a storage cellar originally, wasn't it? It was
just a warehouse. Just a warehouse. So it wasn't made for lots of people. So my mother-in-law and a friend start walking down the steps, but of course the heat then hits them, and the hair starts going, starts warping off to the side. She said, I'm not messing my hair up for anybody. Turned around and went back, and she never went down to see them.
Oh, no.
And she never went back. That was her one chance to go and see the Beatles, and because it would wreck her hair, she turned around and went back to work.
No way.
There's vanity.
Bet she was gutted.
Yeah. That's Liverpool for you.
Yeah. So is there any, I mean, I know you touched up on a few then, but is there any sort of lesser known facts that you've discovered that we might not know about with the Beatles?
Oh, loads. I found loads over the years. So many things were a surprise to me. So if you say to anybody, where's the birthplace of the Beatles, which club, everybody will say the Cavern Club. It wasn't.
It was. I'm trying to remember. There's another club because wasn't it Pete Best's mum owned a club?
Correct. Good man. Yeah. The Casbah Club up in West Derby.
That's it.
Yeah. So the Quarrymen, it's John Paul, George and Ken Brown. They opened that club at the end of August 59. And from there, that becomes then the Beatles' base from 1960 when Pete joins on drums. And it's Mona Best who then gets them into the Cavern.
Nice.
So the Beatles were at the Casbah first, and most of the local groups referred to Mona Best as the mother of Merseybeat because all the Liverpool groups played at the Casbah quite often before they played at the Cavern. But of course, the Cavern's where Brian Epstein discovers them and where they played as John, Paul, George and Ringo. Yeah. So that's the official story that's put out for when they become famous. But there's so much happened before Brian takes over because Epstein only took over into November 61.
Yeah.
So they've been going for a few years by then. Other things is I love going to the very, very beginning. And one of the first things I did nearly 20 years ago now was I invited John's original Quarrymen to come and play at Dovedale School.
Oh, okay.
They got back together in 1997, 40 years after John and Paul had met. And they were so popular that they've stayed performing ever since. So I booked them to appear and they played at Dovedale School, which was brilliant. So I've got to know them all really well. And it's talking to them and getting to know them, is trying to find how the group actually started. And they said there was a guy at Quarry Bank, of course we're now Calderstone School, at Quarry Bank called George Lee. And he was the guy who said to John Lennon, why don't you start a group?
Right.
But nobody knew what had happened to him. So he's always been this lad who's been known about, but we didn't know what happened. And then it must be probably about 10 years ago, after my first book had come out, I just got this email saying, George Lee. Oh, this could be interesting. This lad said, just read your book. He's my dad. So, okay. And obviously the big question, is he still alive and can I speak to him? Yeah. No, we'd love to.
Wow.
So his name is Jeff Lee.
Okay.
Now you'll get this, obviously, because as a local thing, because everybody at school, you get a nickname, don't you?
Yeah.
So because he was G. Lee, our biggest department store was George Henry Lee, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So his nickname was George. George
All right,
Lee.
okay.
So everybody knew him as George. And it turns out and he told me one story that John Lennon, because he was in the same class as him, John went down to his house, knocked on the door, and Jeff's mum answered, and John said, is George there? And he said, nobody called George lives here. All right, missus, no problem, and cycled off again. Because everyone should refer to him as George. That's why they couldn't find him. So I had this great conversation with him. And it turns out then he had a guitar which he couldn't play. He then lends that to John. And that's the first guitar that John learns to play on.
Wow.
And it is Jeff who said to John, come on, you're always talking. You want to make music. You want to sing. Why don't you get a group started? And so he did. So this was the guy who starts absolutely everything at the very, very beginning.
Right.
So that is a buzzing thing. That's the start. And nobody else had discovered that.
Fantastic.
And it's wonderful. So there's all kinds of stuff there's so many myths around about the Beatles. Having to debunk various ones of those, which is fun. And because there's so many gaps, I get to fill the gaps in history, particularly when I go over to America, because for most Americans, the Beatles were formed on the Ed Sullivan Show in February 1964.
It was the Americans that discovered the Beatles.
And it's funny, we went over there in 2014, so it's the 50th anniversary of the Ed Sullivan Show. So it was mad. We're in this big hotel in Manhattan, and there's thousands of people this whole weekend. So we did one of these panels. So we got a load of us, there's about half a dozen of us from Liverpool. So we're just answering questions. And somebody asked me, he said, so what are you doing back in Liverpool to celebrate the 50th anniversary? So, of course, I said, we had ours 2 years ago. When Love Me Do came out, and Ringo joined. Oh, yeah. There was something that happened before Ed Sullivan.
Yeah.
So that's my pleasure. That's what I do, is fill in all the blanks before Ed Sullivan. So
yeah, because you hear about like the songs that were released, which was Love Me Do, and then Please Please Me, which was actually the first number one.
Or was it?
Well, is it because you see on these compilation albums, and it seems to be like the American version, which was then From Me to You, which was the number one over there. But I think officially the first number one was Please Please Me after Love Me Do.
It depends, because I think there was 2 or 3 charts running. And they number one in 1 or 2 of the charts, but not in the third one. And most people were calculating everything by the third chart, like I think it might be in the Record Mirror chart or something. So they were number one on a couple of charts, but not in one of the others.
Right.
So that's why it's always got an asterisk against it. So it might or might not have been. So
okay.
We'll just say it is.
Yeah, we'll just say it is, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
we can determine history.
The anthology says it is as well.
That's good enough for me.
So, during your research, was there anything that you've ever found out as to why? Because I don't think anybody truly knows. Found out why Pete was sacked from the Beatles.
You see, you're asking me exactly the right question, because I'm the person who found out exactly what happened to Pete.
Oh, right, okay. Pray tell.
And I'll start with Pete Best was never sacked from the Beatles.
Okay.
So this is how it happened.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so we've been told since 1962 that Brian Epstein calls Pete into the office and says, you know, the boys want you out. Ringo's joining Saturday. And Pete's stunned, I think, what the hell's going on? And he thinks, well, I've been sacked, and off he goes. So I interviewed Brian Epstein's lawyer.
Wow, okay.
And he put things straight. Thankfully, he was only living up the road in Gatka. And he said to me, Brian didn't sack Pete because he couldn't sack Pete. Because Brian did not employ the Beatles. The Beatles employed Brian.
Right.
So if you're going to be sacked, it has to be your employer sacking an employee. But Brian had no authority to sack him. The Beatles could sack Brian, but Brian couldn't sack Pete. Got no authority to do that.
Okay.
So the big problem was they had to get Pete out of the group quickly and make him think that he was being sacked. And so we go back to, and the words that Brian said and Pete said, they've always agreed on, which were, the boys want you out. And it's been decided that Ringo's joining on Saturday. Nowhere within there does Brian say, you've been fired.
Yeah.
The implication is, and you cannot blame Pete for thinking, well, I've been replaced, therefore I've been sacked. So Pete then got a lawyer who started to sue Brian for wrongful dismissal.
Right.
So the lawyer, Brian's lawyer, could just send him back to, we didn't employ him, so you can't sue us. And that just went backwards and forwards. Now, if Pete had got some decent legal advice, what they would have found is that, and one of the things I discovered was that John, Paul, George and Pete signed a partnership agreement with a Liverpool solicitor at the end of 1961. And in UK law, as a partner, you cannot sack another partner.
Right.
So John, Paul and George couldn't just kick Pete out of the partnership. You have to dissolve a partnership. You draw up the bank books, all that kind of stuff, pay them off, and then you start another group if you want to. But Pete's lawyer didn't know that. But Brian's lawyer did. So the advice had to be, in a way, you've got to convince Pete that he's been fired when he hasn't been, which is why Brian was so nervous at that meeting. I mean, Brian didn't want to do it anyway. But he gets so nervous, and so he says the right words, so he doesn't tell Pete he's been sacked. But because of the management contract Brian had with the Beatles, which they signed, which Brian didn't sign, but John, Paul, George and Pete had signed, Brian's still responsible for finding work for Pete, even if he's not in the Beatles. So Brian then offers Pete the chance to build a new group around him.
Okay.
But that was with the Mersey Beats, who were just starting out, and Tony and Billy were only 16 and 15. So, Pete said no to that. So then, because they're still contractually tied, Brian's friend, Joe Flannery, also a promoter, was putting a group together. Joe Flannery then invites Pete to join this new group, Lee Curtis and the All-Stars. As soon as Pete says yes to joining that, he's quit the Beatles.
Right.
So that's nice and straightforward, isn't it? And that's the abbreviated version. But with all these years, we've been told that Pete was sacked, and for that, he wasn't. And that's a legal fact. It's not an opinion. So under UK law, he was never actually sacked. So then the next question is normally, so why did they want to get rid of him?
Yeah.
And that's where all the myths then build up. So they put out so many reasons. Pete was a crap drummer. He wouldn't change his haircut. The others were jealous because he got all the girls, all that kind of stuff.
Well, he was considered, wasn't he, to be one of the best drummers around at the time?
Exactly right. See, you know that. We know that from Liverpool, because that's what the Liverpool people have always known.
Yeah.
No, he's a really, really good drummer. But when it goes outside of Liverpool, the myth has been put out. I think because Lennon made one quote, early 1970s, when he changed his opinion more than he changed his socks to John. And he said something, Pete was a lousy drummer. We were always going to get rid of him. And somebody said to me the other day, I've seen that quote. That's all I need to know. That's good enough for me.
Right.
Okay, so you're telling me that it's taken John, Paul and George, these great musicians, right, 2 years to suddenly discover that the drummer can't play drums.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. If anybody's a musician, I can have that conversation. I've played with so many different drummers over the years. Very, very quickly, normally within, say, an hour, if somebody can play drums or not.
Yep.
I've played with drummers who can't and who can play drums.
So have I.
Yeah, exactly. So very quickly, don't you?
Yeah.
You know how quickly. No, you think, yeah, they're not up to it. They can't keep time or whatever it is. You cannot rely on them. It doesn't take you 2 years, does it?
No.
And Pete played, I think, more hours live with the Beatles than Ringo did.
Wow.
Because by the time Ringo's joined and they're only performing for like 35, 40 minutes at the most. Whereas Pete was slogging away for the hundreds of hours out in Hamburg.
Yeah.
No. So if you want another John Lennon quote, John Lennon said, if you didn't see the Beatles playing the clubs in Hamburg and Liverpool, where we played straight rock, you never saw the real Beatles. That's when we were at our best.
Yeah.
And that's when they were with Pete best. So depends how many quotes you want to go with. But Pete was a very, very good drummer. And Paul has said that in interviews over the years. He was a very good drummer. Now, maybe personally, he didn't fit in as well. There was something different there. Well, fine. That happens in groups. It's not a reason to sack somebody. If they're a really good drummer and they fit, musically you fit together, you can get over that, can't you?
Yeah.
But with drummers, stands out.
Have any of the Beatles or the remaining Beatles, have they ever been in touch with Pete since, like, just as like whether to say hello or?
No, nothing. Absolutely
not
nothing.
Even when Paul's come up to Liverpool.
No, he's not. And I think it's one of the sad things because Peter's reached out a few times, and he said, forget also the stuff that went on when he left the group. He said, forget all that. We're all grandfathers now. We had some really good time for a couple of years. Now, let's just have a pint, talk about the old days, have a laugh, have a catch up. But no, they won't. So from the day he walked out of Brian's office, none of them ever said a word to him.
No, it's a sad little bit of a sad ending, that really.
It is, and it's
considering he was there to help them get there.
Exactly. Because if he wasn't in the group playing Hamburg and Liverpool, they wouldn't then have made the first record, My Bonnie, out in Hamburg in June '61.
Yeah.
That's the record that brings them to Brian Epstein's attention, who goes to the Cavern to see them and to sign them, who gets them the record deal with Parlophone and George Martin. Well, if Pete isn't there in those 2 years, none of the rest of it happens.
Yeah.
I know it could have been another drummer, but whoever it was who was in that position was part of the group, should have the credit for what they did. And that was Pete. He did his 2 years almost to the day. He did his 2 years with the Beatles and got them to that position of getting their record contract. And it's just at the end, he missed out. And the only evidence that there is as to why he missed out was when he did the audition for George Martin on the 6th of June, 1962. He said to Brian afterwards, don't mind what you do as a group, but if I give you a contract, because it was still a big if, and if we make a record, I'll bring in a session drummer. Quite normal practice for back then.
Yeah.
All the way through the 60s, session musicians were getting used. Brian didn't know that because he was a record retailer. He sold records, but he didn't know the business.
Yeah.
He then goes to John, Paul and George and says, if we get the contract, then George Martin doesn't think Pete's good enough to play on the record. And they think, well, if the producer doesn't think he's good enough for the record, this is our very last chance of getting a record contract. We're going to have to get another drummer. So, and it's a straight business decision. So all the other myths that are out there, that's all revisionism, looking back and trying to create all the other stuff. Oh, because he was popular with the girls, he didn't fit in. All that kind of stuff is all secondary. Nothing happens until that day. And again, Brian's lawyer confirmed, said, not long after that, Brian said, looks like we're going to have to replace the drummer. How do we go about doing that? That's the first time he's consulted on that. Now, what most people think is then, oh, well, I think Paul once said it, we just decided, no, we needed the best drummer in Liverpool. Pete wasn't quite up to it, so we went for Ringo. And so Ringo replaced Pete, which again isn't the truth.
Yeah.
Because Ringo was one of 4 drummers who were asked.
Right, okay.
And he wasn't the first. So the first guy they asked was Bobby Graham. He was a top session drummer and was playing with Joe Brown, the brothers. They were on UK tour, and the Beatles were on the same bill as them. And so Brian said to him, would you come and join the Beatles? Now, top session drummer based in London, had a #1 record, great career. Why is he going to quit that to come up to Liverpool to join a group he's never heard of, who've just been given their first record contract? So, of course, he turned them down flat. That wasn't going to happen. They then asked another local drummer called Richie Galvin. He was playing with Earl Preston and the TTs, the really good local band. And he said, no, he wasn't going to do it either. Then they asked Ringo. So Ringo was asked on the Saturday. Brian telephoned him on the Tuesday to confirm it. Pete was brought into the office the following day on the Wednesday. And then Ringo joined and made his debut on the following Saturday. All happened in a week. But interestingly, the best drummer in Liverpool, according to most musicians, was Johnny Hutchinson.
Right.
He was in the big 3.
Okay.
Absolutely brilliant drummer. Really, really good drummer. Again, somebody I got to know personally. Nice guy. He was also offered the chance to replace Pete Best the day after Ringo had been asked.
Really?
Yeah. Because it was on the same day that Peter left Brian's office. Brian had said, by the way, the lads want to know, can you play drums until Saturday, until Ringo joins? I mean, the cheek of that. Of course, poor Pete, he's an absolute daze and thinks, yeah, okay, whatever, and walks out. Think, hang on, what did I just... Not a chance. So that night they're playing over in Chester. The Beatles are the headline act, and the big 3 were the support act. So they say to Johnny Hutch, do us a favour. Once you're finished with the big 3, can you sit in with the Beatles? Which he does. And after that, Brian said, I think that went so well. You fit perfectly in with the other 3. Would you become their permanent drummer? And he said, not for a big clock. Not a chance.
Wow.
He said, the Beatles don't make the same sound that we can make. So, no, he turned them down. So that sort of questions what they would have done with Ringo. Now, one of Brian's associates had said that Ringo only joined as almost like a session musician on probation for a few weeks before becoming a full-time member. It is possible. But my conclusion is always the only way it would have worked the way it worked is with Ringo. He was the right drummer for the Beatles. And he then goes on to be one of the world's greatest drummers. He almost like reinvents the role of the drummer. He has got a natural ability to play whatever song's put in front of him and improvise on the spot. And he got so in tune with the other 3 that, it's like, if you're playing with other musicians, if you play with them for a while, you're just in tune with what they're doing. Yeah. You know exactly what to do. And that's what he could do.
Do you think that's because obviously Ringo was originally with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes? Do you think that's because they was a similar style of group as the Beatles, so he could fit in pretty much straight away? Or
I think there's a bit of that. I think also because the Beatles with Pete were a rock and roll group, mainly playing covers of stuff. So they're an absolutely great rock and roll group. Rory Storm and the Hurricanes did rock and roll, but they also had summer seasons at Butlins. And when you're there, you can't just do hard rock and roll. You've got to be looking at stuff that's a bit more family friendly.
Yeah.
From other varieties of genres of music. And I think that because Ringo had started in skiffle and he liked jazz, and he loved country music and rock and roll. He had a greater variety of styles he could naturally play. Pete had gone from almost nothing straight into rock and roll, and within a matter of months of starting to play drums, was in the Beatles in Hamburg, mainly playing rock and roll. So I think Ringo had a greater variety of styles that he could rely upon then. Because the way I look at it is, when Pete leaves, that's the end of the Beatles. And there's a brand new group called the Fab Four, who are a pop group.
Yeah.
So the Beatles, the rock and roll group, are finished. And the pop group, the Fab Four, writing original music, have been formed. Their style is different. And Ringo was perfectly suited to that. So if you can see them as the two separate groups, there's no reason why you can't give full credit to both Pete and to Ringo.
Yeah.
So that's why I see it. And one of the books I wrote was Finding the Fourth Beatle, which is the story just of all the drummers. So from Colin Hanson, the first drummer in the Quarrymen in 1956, through to 1970, that's the story of every drummer who played. How many do you reckon are in there?
Well, there was one that was on the 1964 tour when Ringo was ill.
Jimmy Nicol.
Jimmy Nicol, that was it. I was going to ask you, he's another one I'm going to ask you about in a minute.
Yeah.
So obviously you got Ringo, you got Pete, and then there's about, I'd say about another 4 or 5 before that.
Okay, I got 23.
Okay, okay.
Some of them only played once, but they had to have played either at a concert with them or on a record with them at some point.
Oh, you've also got Andy White.
Andy White, yeah, because he sat in as the session drummer on Love Me Do. Yeah.
So how there's been that many?
Yeah. And the thing is, and since you put that book out, which was about 2018, I've found 3 more. So
wow.
I'm up to 26 drummers.
26 and counting.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the great thing. There's always something else to find. I'm always learning something new, which is great. That's the fun of what I get to do.
Brilliant. I want your job. I'll swap you.
There are times when you can have it.
So I said we'll jump forward to 1964 when Ringo suddenly becomes ill with tonsillitis. Tonsillitis, and Jimmy Nicol steps in. What happened to him? Have you ever done any research on him, or?
Yeah, so he's one of the drummers. Obviously, did research for the book. So he was a very, very talented drummer, and kind of one of those strange things that you then pick up digging into his career. So with Love Me Do as a song, there's now 4 different Beatles drummers, 4 different versions. So there's Pete Best's one at the audition in June 62, Ringo's version from the 4th of September, Andy White's version from the 11th. But then in early 64, Jimmy Nicol, as a session drummer, played on a record label called Top 6. Do you remember the Top of the Pops albums we used to get in Woolworths with all the cover artists on? Yeah, not the original recordings.
Yeah.
So this was an equivalent. Yeah. I've still got them somewhere. They were great. It's terrible, but great.
Yeah.
And in early 64, Jimmy Nicol, as a session drummer, had played on this Top 6 EP, which is covering 6 songs from the top of the charts, which were all Beatles songs, which included Love Me Do.
Okay.
So Jimmy Nicol's the 4th drummer who played a version of Love Me Do. So he knew all the Beatles songs. And he literally, as you were saying, Ringo goes off to hospital with his tonsillitis just before the world tour. There's no insurance for a tour. Nobody's done a world tour before. So there's no question of cancelling it. So to get hold of Jimmy Nicol, and he's been referred to them. So he fits in. So he has a little rehearsal. Next day, they're flying off. So we follow his career. He plays in Denmark, he plays in Holland, plays in Hong Kong, gets down to Australia. So he does 2 weeks with them. And then Ringo rejoins them. And there's photos, and I'm sure there's film footage as well.
Yeah.
And they're in, I think it's Adelaide, and they're on a balcony. And there's hundreds of thousands of screaming kids out there. and you got 5 Beatles up there. So Jimmy Nichols, the first one to be called the 5th Beatle.
Yep.
And he's up there, but Ringo's there as well. So Ringo pretends to strangle Jimmy. So Jimmy pretends to strangle Ringo. And I'm sure at that point he's thinking, if I just squeeze that little bit harder, can I make this last longer? And then there's probably the saddest photograph you'll ever see. Ringo's back. They don't need him. Jimmy Nichols wants to stay down in Australia.
Oh, he's sat in an airport, isn't he?
That's the one. And that photo's in the departure lounge on his own. And he's just been there, been screamed at by 300,000 people in Australia. And there he is, packed off with a gold watch from Brian. Thanks very much. Off you go.
Yeah.
Stuck in an airport. And that's it. So he comes back to the UK, trading on the back of that. He has a group called the Shub Dubs. They had a few singles. They toured. And to be fair to the Beatles, they tried to give him some work as well, tried to include him. But it didn't quite work out for him with playing around the UK. He ends up in Sweden, plays with the group there, Sputniks. They're massive. They tour. And something happens when they're in Mexico and he has a falling out. He decides to stay there. He sets up home, marries a girl out there. So he's out in Mexico for years. And then he sort of disappears from the face of the earth. Now, he has a son who became an audio engineer, who was then brought in to work on the anthology.
Oh, okay.
And was part of the award-winning team who put the anthology CDs together as a sound engineer.
Right.
So again, I think they were just looking after Jimmy. And then a journalist spotted him walking the streets of London, working as a painter and decorator.
Wow.
And by this time, he looks nothing like he looked back then.
Yeah.
And then he disappeared again, and we've no idea what happened to him. Nobody's found him. So we assume if he'd died, we would have found out. So we just don't know. But I think the way he looks at it is, it was the greatest thing he ever did and the worst thing he ever did. Because when you get to the top of the mountain, where'd you go?
Well, it's only down, isn't it?
So only down. So you could never recapture that. So it was great while it lasted. It's like he said, you walk down the street and nobody looks at you. You walk down the street as a Beatle and everybody's screaming after you.
Yeah.
That must have been mad. Must have been insane. Crazy. Just for those 2 weeks. And then you're back to almost sort of reality again.
Yeah. Shame.
Yeah.
I have the only thing I'd heard about Jimmy Nichols was apparently there was a producer or something trying to secure the rights to a film about him. I think it was his son might have said no, or I'm not sure what the surroundings are. So I don't know whether it's still going ahead or not. Or
well, it is, because the guy doing it is a friend of mine. So Jim Birkenstadt, and he wrote the book called The Beatles That Vanished.
Right.
Which is all Jimmy Nichols' story. So he's had the script. He's been trying to work on the film. And yet when that was made public, Jimmy's son did come out and say, no, I'm not supporting this. I'm not backing it. They are still trying to get the funding together to make the film, because it's a great, great story.
I think it would be, yeah.
Yeah, and I know because he popped up in about 1984, I think it was, at a Beatles fans convention in Holland. And he turns up and he does a talk and he plays with a local group. And he said, I'm going to put it all in my book. I'm working on writing my book at the moment. And everybody was waiting eagerly for it. And then never heard again. And it's a great story. And he was a very, very talented drummer. Very talented drummer. And did a lot of great stuff. But of course, he'll be remembered for those 2 weeks with the Beatles. But he deserves some acclaim while he's alive. He don't really want to get it to a stage where he dies and everybody says, oh, what a wonderful guy he was. He deserves just something, some recognition. Because I'm sure, Ringo and Paul will be more than happy to give him that acclaim.
Well, in fact, he was actually part of the Beatles story. He wasn't just somebody who was just flitted in. He was a part of that story because he was on the first world tour.
And he saved the world tour.
Yeah.
because that really. I mean, George in particular was saying, well, if Ringo can't play, then we don't play. We're not the Beatles. And Brian had to say, we've got no option. All the money is tied into this tour. We're not covered by insurance for cancellation. It has to go ahead, so we have to find somebody.
Yeah.
And you can see in the first concert, he's still trying to work out what to do, but because he played as a session drummer, he adapted very quickly. And of course, his favorite quote, which became a Beatles song, was, "How are you getting on, Jimmy? It's getting better all the time."
Wow, really?
That was Jimmy Nichols' phrase.
Brilliant.
So again, that's a little nod to Jimmy. It's getting better all the time.
Fantastic.
See, all that this stuff is in my head. It's ridiculous.
Okay,
you sure you want my job?
Okay, we'll jump forward another couple of years from 1964, and we'll get to 1966, and a little rumour started to emerge about one of the members of the Beatles. I don't believe it whatsoever.
No.
But there was, I don't know if you've ever seen it on YouTube or anywhere else. There's a documentary, The Last Testaments of George Harrison, with the really great George Harrison voiceover.
Really sounds like him, doesn't he? Honestly, because we all talk like that, don't we?
So we'll just talk about that a little bit. How did this come about?
I mean, there's so many things. I think that the whole "Paul is Dead" was the best one. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant that the Beatles then played into. That the real Paul McCartney's died. He's been replaced by a lookalike. And here's all the clues. And that's when you start playing Sgt. Pepper backwards, and you start looking for these. And of course, the famous one is relating to the Abbey Road cover.
Yeah.
Paul's barefoot, so he's dead. John's the priest at the front. They're the pallbearers, all that kind of stuff. Because by then, because it had become famous, the Beatles were then playing into it.
I was going to say, do you think that although the Sgt. Pepper cover, a couple of the songs, George Harrison pointing at one of the words in the lyrics and stuff like that, do you think, do you think that's what the Beatles actually used to do? We'll work with this and just see if people notice.
Oh, they loved it. They thought it was hysterical.
Right.
And reading things into the number plate on the Volkswagen Beetle parked just the other side of the Abbey Road crossing suggests that Paul died aged 28.
Yeah.
And it's like with anything. If you go looking for something, you'll find something. Even if it's not real, you'll find it because you're looking hard enough for the clues.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they loved about it the most, was that people are finding all these clues, someone saying, this proves it, and that, and that. And you read it and you think, no, there's more chances that the moon's made of cheese and we've got UFOs. Oh, don't diss the UFOs. It's wonderful. Conspiracy theories are just fantastic. And that one, I just absolutely love it. And they definitely played into that one.
Yeah.
They loved it.
Yeah. I always found that documentary was brilliant, but there's so many holes in that documentary. But they even go as far back as the Rubber Soul album. So because it had that elongated look on it, that was to disguise the fact that this lookalike, William Campbell, to distort him because he'd had his plastic surgery. I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute. It's 1965 was Rubber Soul, but yet he supposedly died in 66.
Yes, but they knew they were going to do that.
All right.
So they'd invented time travel, which definitely exists.
Okay.
So if you close your eyes and think hard enough, you'll go back in time.
Well, that makes sense now.
Yeah, because they jumped on the Magical Mystery Tour. Went through Lucy on the Sky with Diamonds. Oh, yeah, we're talking about LSD. Now, how did it come up? Yeah. Somebody was tripping nicely, weren't they?
Oh, yes.
You got to love it.
Do you think the Beatles as themselves, as we know them, their individual characters and personas, were they a natural formation, or do you think it was something that Brian sort of said, right, well, Paul's going to be the babyface nice straight lad, and John's going to be the real, hard man, and Ringo's going to be, the clown. And do you think that those personas were manufactured, or that's just naturally how they were?
No, that's how they were. John was naturally lazy. And so with the Quarrymen, the first 12 months, it's a group of friends having fun. And it's still a group of friends having fun. And the Quarrymen must be mad because they've made me a member of the Quarrymen now. So my stories have gone full circle. So next weekend, I'm off to Bristol playing with the Quarrymen.
Fantastic.
I've just been in Germany playing with them as well.
No wonder we couldn't get hold of you.
Yeah. So it's mad. But it's great, we're talking with those lads. And because, most of the founding members were at school with John, and I've spoken to enough of John's school friends, he wouldn't have had the drive to go to the next stage. He wanted to be Elvis. He wanted to go to rock and roll. But when Paul sees him for the first time, John's only playing banjo chords on his guitar. He can't even play the thing properly. Paul comes along. He can play guitar. When he meets John, he plays John's guitar upside down because Paul's left-handed.
Yeah.
And he can sing. And he knows the right lyrics and everything. They like the same music. So John and Paul clicked. Paul's the one who could sort of, by increments, suddenly make the Quarrymen better and better. And Paul manages to take John with him. John still being the leader of the group, but Paul can lead him in the right direction at the same time as well. So I think what Brian saw was that the thing that John always wanted was, it was never, even though it was his group, it was never about him. He never had this ego for it being John and the Beatles. It was the Beatles, it was the group. And I think what Brian saw was each of them had their own personalities. Now, you got a group here with 3 lead singers at that time.
Which was rare, really, wasn't it, at that time?
Nobody had anything like that at all. And of course, they end up with 3 really good songwriters as well, which again is very rare. You probably only find the Eagles or Queen, where so many different members have written really good songs as well.
Yeah.
So I thought Brian saw their different sense of humour, their different characters. So John was the one who, in Liverpool, you learn to fight with your mouth before you learn to fight with your fists. So John was like that. He very rarely got into a physical fight, but he could cut you dead with his mouth. Paul, always very keen with the PR, thinking the bigger picture. So Brian could see that in him. And Paul liked to play up the cutesy baby face stuff. Ringo naturally was, and always will be, the funny guy, the clown. And a bit like in Hard Day's Night, he could play that sort of, that almost like droopy, with the sad face.
Yeah, yeah.
But he could be really funny. And I think sometimes that's been to the detriment of his part in the Beatles story. I think Ringo's the clown at the back. He was the lucky guy who joined just before they became big. You cannot take Ringo out of the songs the Beatles recorded. He did contribute a hell of a lot. George, they say George was the quiet one. No, he was quietened because it had been John, Paul and George since the end of 57. But once they get the record deal, then the contract is all about the songwriters.
Yeah.
The first major deal they sign is about John and Paul. And George Martin's thing was, is John the leader or is Paul the leader? So immediately, Ringo and George are pushed back. But George was the funniest one. His sense of humour. 2 very, very key moments where it's just that dry Liverpool wit. First time the meeting with Brian Epstein downtown. John was always on time. Paul McCartney, he was the diva. Right? He turned up when he felt like turning up.
Okay.
Right? Brian, punctuality was everything to Brian. So that in the office and Paul's not there. So Brian is not happy with this, goes out, secretary rings home, and he storms back in. Can't believe it. Paul's just got out of the bath You're going to be very late. And George says, yes, but very clean. Breaks the atmosphere. Does the same on that first meeting with George Martin. So they go through the audition, and it's average. And they're in the control room. George Martin gives them a 20-minute lecture about what they've done, what they might be doing. He says, okay, that's me done. Is there anything you don't like? Silence, George. Well, I don't like your tie. And at first, George Martin thinks, what? Then he gets it. And because George Martin had worked with Peter Sellers and Spike Milligan and the Goons, and John, Paul and George in particular, loved the Goons, they then, the next half an hour or so, just doing a Goonish sense of humour. And it clicked. So George, he could be really, really funny when he wanted to. But people just think he was quiet, but he wasn't. But he could be quite vocal.
Right, okay.
Studio. And he always had to stand up to Paul, because Paul always treated him like a little brother.
Yeah.
But he's younger than him, and they'd gone through the institute together. Paul always looked down on him, and he said, no, over the years, I probably treated him badly by doing that. So George had to sort of fight against that of being the kid. When he joins the Quarrymen, John didn't really want him in, because John was 17 and George was only 14.
Yeah.
That's a big gap. You remember back, you're in your teens, a year is a massive gap, but 3 years difference. When you're 17, you don't want a kid hanging around. But because he was such a good guitarist, George joins the Quarrymen. John says it's okay. But that age gap was always an issue.
Yeah.
But no, George could be really, really funny. So he's the only one, I think, where they try and set the quiet one. It's just because he wasn't asked many questions until suddenly we have all the stuff with India, Rishikesh, and some of the Indian influences. They're now letting George answer more and more questions. And you suddenly realise that he's a very, very deep thinking man who's got a lot to say and a lot to share.
Yeah.
I think probably because up to that point, the questions from interviewers, they're always the same ones. What are you going to do when the bubble bursts? They used to get fed up and start throwing in stupid answers because they got really annoyed with the same old stupid questions. But it was mainly to John and Paul they were asked the questions. So George was sort of sidelined a bit. But again, you can't take George out of the group.
Yeah.
His guitar work behind everything they were doing, absolutely phenomenal. But I think Brian saw that and he thought, okay, the struff he gets when he sees them at the Cavern in the black leathers, they're smoking, they're eating, they're drinking, they're swearing, they're clowning around on stage. But the audience loved them and they had this amazing sound. And it's what George Martin saw. He saw the personalities more than the music. And I think once you realize if you got that, they can write songs, they're going to need some help, but they can write songs, but they've got great personalities as well. This could work. And Brian made the most of that. So he did all right at the end, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Which is why we're still talking about more these years later.
So we'll just go back a bit now to, I think, rather another member of the Beatles story, which I think is also a bit of a sad demise to it as well, is Stuart. Have you, part of your research, have you met anybody like Klaus and Astrid, who were obviously big influences on the Beatles when they were in Hamburg?
Well, I've actually became very good friends with Stuart's sister, Pauline.
Okay.
And I helped to run the official Stuart Sutcliffe fan club.
Oh, brilliant.
So again, it's something I'm passionate about, is because there's so many myths put out there. Oh, Stuart couldn't play bass. He stood with his back to the audience. He wasn't plugged in. In the first couple of weeks, yes, because he was learning the bass. By the time he's playing in Hamburg with them, he's a good rock and roll bass player. Now, of course, playing normal rock and roll bass isn't difficult.
It's not the most blues, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's not the most challenging thing, but he was a good rock and roll bass player. He played in other bands over in Hamburg. Now, Klaus Voormann then wants to be a bass player like Stuart. And of course, he then becomes a bass player, plays with Manfred Mann, plays Plastic Ono Band, etc., has a really good career as a bass player. So Stuart was a really good bass player. So his story, we've had interviews with Astrid. Project I'm working on at the moment is a documentary about the Beatles in Hamburg.
Okay.
So going through all the interviews and stuff. So we're actually working with Klaus, using some of his artwork. In that, we've got an interview with him. And of course, Astrid and Stuart fell in love really quickly. Astrid takes the best rock and roll photos that have ever been taken. No, they're absolutely brilliant, those ones she took in Hamburg. So he becomes a key part of the Beatles story. Now, he's the first one to get what becomes known as the mop top haircut, which Astrid cuts. And then Paul and John, when they go to Paris in, was it October, November 61, they meet up with Jürgen Vollmer, the third of the three friends, and he had that haircut naturally. So John and Paul get the haircut the same. So that's sort of where the haircut comes from. Jürgen was over in Liverpool a few years back. So the documentary film I've helped to make is called Looking for Lennon. And it's all about John's formative years. So we interviewed everybody who knew John. So it's the most comprehensive documentary that's been done on John's life. And we had a long time talking with Jürgen. Absolute fabulous interview. He was telling us all about meeting him for the first time. And he said, you know, Astrid fell for Stuart. Paul, yeah, we could easily get on with Paul straight away. But he said, at first, I was very unsure of John. You know, he could come across as quite aggressive. And of course, he was goose-stepping and doing the Heil Hitler and all kinds of stuff on stage. So they were very wary of him at first, but then become really good friends. And those three, Astrid, Klaus and Jürgen, become so important to the story as friends of theirs and stay friends with them as well. So hearing their stories are fabulous, but as you say, it's the sad ending and the timing of everything as well. You know, he quit the Beatles in the June 61 because he wants to do his art full time. Paul takes over on bass and they become a four-piece. The Beatles land in Hamburg and they're normally expecting Astrid and Stuart to be there. And what, of course, they didn't know is that Stuart had died the day before. So Astrid is there and John says, "Where's Stuart? Why isn't he here?" And she said,
like the scene in the film Backbeaters. So is that film an actual, because I know a lot of these films sort of add a bit of glamour to it, but is that film actually quite exact to the book?
Depends what exact you're after. Exact for the feeling, the atmosphere, the music of Hamburg, absolutely brilliant as entertainment. A lot of it is fictional because they've had to create a lot of dialogue, because really the film is about the relationship between John, Stuart and Astrid.
Yeah.
And I met and interviewed the director of Backbeat a few years ago. And he said up until quite late on in the process, the other Beatles weren't even going to be in the film because it was purely about Astrid, Stuart and John.
Okay.
But they said, no, particularly it's going to be a commercial film. You've got to have them there because Stuart's part of that story. You've got to have the Beatles in there. And so I think it's one of the best films for putting over the atmosphere that the Beatles created on stage. The band they put together was absolutely brilliant. And they toured for a while after that. The Backbeat Beatles, really, really good live. So I think that they got that brilliant. And I think it's been the best depiction, really, of what Hamburg was like. So dialogue-wise, they had to create quite a lot. But it is based around the facts that everybody knows of what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the relationship between the three of them. That's what the film's about. But no, it's a really, really good film.
Yeah,
really
I went to the premiere of that when it came out, and I was sat. I think he was in front, the row in front of me, to about three people to the left. It was Alan Williams.
Oh yeah,
a lot of people don't know, but he was the Beatles' first manager.
He was great, Alan. I got to know Alan, and last time I saw him was only about 3 or 4 weeks before he died. So he lived into his 80s. An absolute character. He was so funny. He always had this get-rich-quick scheme he was working on. of stuff. One thing I'm glad of is on that last time I saw him, and his memory was starting to go, and he was starting to repeat himself a bit. So I could see quite a change in him. But I said, you have to realise, Alan, without you doing what you did in 1960, there would be no Beatles for people to talk about. You got them their first drummer, Tommy Moore, and the second drummer, Norman Chapman. You gave them the Jacaranda to play in. You took them to Hamburg when everybody said, don't take them.
Yeah.
If you hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have had the Beatles. And I'm so glad I said that to him the last time I saw him. Because he was still looking very healthy. And then he just suddenly went about 4 weeks later. Wow. But he was a great, great character, was Alan. So funny. He had so many stories to tell. And that was the great thing. You could just sit and listen to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you tried to get him early. So if you're doing an interview with him, he was used to meet in the Grapes. And that's the first place I met him, first time I met him. And as I was advised, try and get him sort of late morning, 12 o'clock latest. So we met at noon in the Grapes on Matthew Street. And his doctor had told him, if you don't quit drinking, you'll be dead in the 12 months. So Alan being Alan said, okay, so that's not going to happen. I'm not going to give up drink. So what's the least worst thing I can drink for my health? And he said, well, they are right in saying, a little bit of red wine can be good for the health. So he didn't hear the little bit. He heard the red wine. And it's the only person I know who had red wine on ice.
Right.
That was his drink. So by sort of 4 or 5 drinks, he's sort of losing the story. But so you get all the important questions in first, get all that, and then it just entertain you after that. But he was a lovely, lovely guy, was Alan. But he was that crucial to the story. If you don't have Alan Williams getting them started, there's no group for Brian to find. No, he was there at the very beginning. And the Beatles did the dirty on him because he was getting 10% commission in Hamburg. Right. But because they then said they'd organised the move to the next club, the Top 10. And even though Alan got them gigs when he came home the first time, he helped get them back into Hamburg. They thought, why should we pay him 10%? So they just wrote to him and said, no, we're not paying you anymore, which was wrong.
Yeah.
And of course, Alan, being Alan, said, right, that's it. You'll never work in Liverpool again. I'll see to it. We've got a contract. Don't think you can do that to me. That wasn't worth the paper it was written on, was it? And they eventually they did apologise to him. But yeah, he was crucial. He was absolutely crucial to the beginning of the Beatles. So great man.
I think with a lot of things about the Beatles, there's a lot of stories that come full circle, i.e. Klaus Voormann, he came full circle twice because obviously he went from the Hamburg days through to the Plastic Ono band and performing on John Lennon's Imagine album.
Yeah.
And then he comes full circle again later on when he comes to the anthology because he designed the cover.
Yeah. Well, he designed the Revolver. The Beatles Revolver
and
cover as well. So, because that's how he started when he first met. He'd done a cover for a single for a German group. So he showed that to John. So they knew that he was a good graphic artist. So he does Revolver, and of course, he comes and does the anthology. And
then you got Jimmy Nicol. He came full circle because his son ended up on
anthology,
being the anthology team as well. So
yeah. And thankfully, they gave Alan Williams the credit then with anthology. And I think that was the first time the Beatles actually referred to him as their manager.
Right. Okay.
As opposed to their agent. So again, it was good. They were giving some of the people some of the credit. What I like to find is the stories that everybody else who contributed something who don't make it into like the anthology. So the second book I did was called The Fab 104, The Evolution of the Beatles. So I had 104 people involved in the story of starting as the Quarrymen and reaching the end of 1962. So this is the people who taught them to play, any other group they played in, people they backed on stage, all of these people who played a little part. You know, they deserve the credit.
Yeah.
There's a guy called Arthur Pendleton. And I always say, do you know what Arthur Pendleton did for the Beatles? No.
Nope.
Arthur Pendleton taught John Lennon how to play the harmonica.
All right. Okay.
The harmonica is what brought George Martin into that audition, which said, in the end, that's why we'll release Love Me Do, is because of the harmonica.
Well, didn't I'm not sure how true this is. Didn't John Lennon get a harmonica off his uncle?
Yes, but he didn't know how to play it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so his Uncle George. His Uncle George was, again, big influence in John's life. He was the father figure, really, for John from the age of 5. Because his Aunt Mimi was great, but she was strict. She wasn't maternal. She didn't like children until they were old enough to do chores around the house.
Yeah.
Whereas George was a lovely fella. He had a great relationship. And again, that's one of those tragedies in John's life, is that when John's 14, Uncle George suddenly dropped dead.
Yeah.
Just at the time then, John's reconnecting with his mum, who becomes a great big influence, gets him started with his music. Then she's knocked down and killed when he's 17.
Yeah.
So a lot of tragedy in John's life. But all these people deserve that little bit of credit in the story. And that's what I like to do. It's find those people who most of the time are here in Liverpool.
Yeah.
And tell their stories, because they deserve to be told.
So in another one, in the film Nowhere Boy, there's a scene in it, and I just wanted to ask you, see if you know if this is true or not. There's a scene in it where they're in, I think it's John's Mimi's house, and it looks as if Paul and Julia, John's mum, are getting on rather well, and then John takes Paul outside and socks him one right in the face. Is that bit true, or is that just made up for the film?
Made up for the film. That was probably the turning point when Paul withdrew any support for the film. So it started out being based on the book that Julia Lennon's daughter, Julia Baird, John's half-sister, had written. And that they were going to tell that story. But then they decided to go back and tell Aunt Mimi's version of events. A lot of what was mythical, a lot of which was made up. So Julia Baird then withdraws her support from it. Paul then withdraws his support. I think Paul wasn't happy that the lad who was cast to play him with this little weedy guy who gets punched by John. And he wasn't that weedy. He was little, a little bit weedy. But he didn't take a punch from John. That never happened.
Right.
So it's again, and that's one of your problems with films which are drama, because there's got to be poetic license.
Yeah.
And it's the same with virtually any film that you'll watch, even if it's based on true events. There's so much that has to be created to make the story, to make it compelling to watch all the way to the end. So you need those points of drama. Now, I personally think there's enough drama in John's life anyway.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't need to invent stuff like that, but no, there was never a falling out like that. And John punching Paul, no.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll move on now to, do you fancy playing a little game?
Oh, a game.
We'll have a little game. It's called Fact or Reset. And it's basically our interpretation of true or false, and it's just random questions.
Ooh.
So we'll
fun.
We'll see how you do. Okay, so I'll just cue the music.
Stand clear.
It's Fact or Reset.
There we go. So, first question: if you get the first one wrong, you keep going until you get one right.
Okay.
And then you only have one life.
You're brutal, aren't you? I like this.
We're brutal.
Cruel but fair.
Okay, so the sun is a planet.
That's false.
Correct.
It's a star.
So you're on the board already now.
Ooh.
The capital city of Australia is Sydney.
Canberra.
Correct. The shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept.
Correct. From Luke. Yep. Verse 35.
We're doing really well here.
Yep.
Cockroaches can live for several weeks without its head.
Ooh, that's a good one. That is possibly true.
Correct.
Beetles, cockroaches, and insects. I'm all right with them.
The shortest sentence in the English language is I am.
Shortest sentence? Ooh, that's an interesting one. I've never come across that before. No, because you can say yes and that'd be a sentence, so I'd say that's false.
Unfortunately, it's true.
Is it?
Yes, it's true. So you got 4
so yes,
points there.
Oh, does a sentence have to contain more than one word?
I'm presuming so. I just went off what it said.
Oh, no. Come on. No. You've got to justify now and tell me why I'm wrong.
It just
yes,
said...
Because you said to me, yes, that's a sentence.
Okay. I didn't know that.
I'm challenging that.
What we'll do is we'll research that one for you and we'll get back to you.
I survived anyway.
You survived. You got 4 points, and that was brilliant. That so, I'll let you know where you were on the board.
Can I relax now?
You can relax now, yeah. So I'll just do one more question for you, and it's a question that my co-host Steve asked, and that's about the song "I Am the Walrus." If you can explain exactly what the background of that song is about.
Oh, good question. So I believe that John started writing that because a pupil from Quarry Bank had written in saying, "This is so cool. We're now studying Beatles lyrics in our English lessons." So John thought, right, understand this one. But it's actually based on, John was a massive fan of Lewis Carroll. So Alice in Wonderland, Alice Through the Looking Glass, big fan of his writing. And within that, Lewis Carroll had the poem, The Walrus and the Carpenter. So that's where the I Am the Walrus starts from. So it's based on The Walrus and the Carpenter. But there's that little bit Yellow Matter Custard. Yeah, that was a playground chant.
Yeah.
That was they used to do it at Dovedale School when he was at the primary school. And I think it's one of those ones, with the girls throw the balls up against the wall and they have a little chant that goes with it. So that was a playground chant that was added in there as well. Because that's one that confuses a lot of our foreign Beatles fans. I said, no, we're just weird. It's Liverpool. I mean, these lovely, sweet girls, and that's what they sing about. Strange. It's probably why lads don't like girls at that age.
Yeah, probably,
or they're scared off by them. Scary people. But so the inspiration was Lewis Carroll and the Walrus and the Carpenter. And I know later on that John had said, looking back, he said that the Walrus was Paul. And he said, when he looked back and thought, hang on, the Walrus was the good guy. That's supposed to be me. I wrote it the wrong way round. Of course, it was too late by then.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not that he was on any funny tobacco or other substances at the time. Obviously, when you're at sleep.
I've also heard as well that John Lennon, when he heard that the school he went to was studying Beatles music, and yet the teacher that was doing the teaching was also the same teacher that told him that you'd never get anywhere in life.
Oh, it may well have been. It's funny when you go back and you look at his school records and you look at his school reports. Oh, they're shocking. Because the only thing he was interested in was art and English.
Right.
He said, when you're at primary school, so he loved his time at Dovedale. Said, because they go, here's a piece of paper, be creative. And he loved all that. But then when you get to grammar school, I mean, that was the mad thing back then, that the 11 plus exam. Flipping heck. That sort, your whole life is sorted at age 11 based on this exam.
Wow.
If you passed the exam, you went to a grammar school, which meant you could do any career you wanted. If you didn't pass it, you went to a secondary modern school, which meant you were going into a manual job of some sort. Grammar school, you could do, law, medicine, teaching, etc. If you went to a secondary modern, very rare you could make that crossover.
Wow.
So when you're for a job interview, it's still, I can still remember when I was in work, and I started work back at 83, and people were writing in the job applications. The older people of the team would look and say, okay, where do they live, first of all? And say, no, come from Garston. Right, he hasn't got a chance. Comes from Formby. Oh, they're okay. What school did he go to? Grammar school. All right, they've got a chance. And you think in the post room, they're knowing what the management would do. That's made the difference. Thankfully, they scrapped the 11 plus. What a stupid, elitist, ridiculous exam that was. But as John said, that's the only exam he ever tried to pass. Because it's drummed into you from the age of 5. You have to pass this exam because it changes your life.
Right.
It was ludicrous. But you go back, you read John's school reports, and there was one disciplinary record, and it just over like a 3-week period. And I know Rod Davis from the Quarrymen had said John's the only person he knew at school who got a detention while he was already in detention, which is a talent. That is a talent. And they've got this one, it's just a list of the punishments and what was going wrong for John, why he was in detention. So you got talking in class, chewing in class, talking in class. Then one just says sabotage. I want to know what the hell he did. And a school detention record say sabotage. What the hell did John do?
Oh, you'll have to do some research on that one then.
I know. I wish I could find, honestly, that would be fabulous to know. Yeah, but he was always getting into trouble at school. And again, one thing, and it's in our Looking for Lennon documentary, Rod saying that there was one of the teachers, and he'd been on one of the bombers in the Second World War. He'd end up with a tin leg. He's been through all of that. He's not going to put up with any cheek from someone who thinks he's clever like Lennon. So Lennon was given cheek, and apparently this teacher just picks Lennon up by the scruff, lifts him up, says, "Don't you ever behave like that again in my class or else," and throws him back down again. He's not going to put up with any wisecracking 15-year-old, is he? He's had to deal with all of that. But the teachers they liked John. He wasn't malicious, probably apart from sabotage. But he was mischievous.
Yeah.
He used to do these little magazine things called the Daily Howl.
Daily Howl, yeah.
Yeah, he did all his caricatures. And he'd do the caricatures of the teachers.
Oh.
And all these funny poems, they get passed around the class. They got passed around the staff room as well. And they thought it was funny.
Muggy, Tuggy and Thuggy.
Muggy, Tuggy and Thuggy, exactly. The weather this week.
It is actually, yeah.
No, it's just crap. It's just another word for it. It's wet. Well, there's a surprise. That's why they wrote rain. I think that's why George wrote Here Comes the Sun. That is the song of the optimistic Scouser. One day the sun will actually arrive here. One day.
So where can we find you, Dave, when you're doing these tours? Do you do it on the tour bus, or are you at the houses, or are you at the museum?
I know they've got their own private tour business. It's simply called Liverpool Beatles Tours.
Liverpool Beatles Tours.
Yeah, we've been going for 20 years now. And most of the tours that I do, so minimum 4 hours, quite often there's 7 hours. The longest we've done is like 9 hours, 9 hour day. Occasionally somebody will want to do stuff over 2 days or 3 days, which we've done. Longest we've done is put a whole week together for 2 ladies from America. So they wanted Beatles and local history and stuff as well. And that obviously wasn't enough because they're coming back for another 6 days this year in September. But it's great fun because they're private tours. So normally it's for a couple or for a family. Then every tour's different because it's based on whatever their story is, and you have fun. And you have your lovely little quiz there. We do a quiz where we're cruel but fair, and as we always say to them, points make prizes, And the more points you get, the closer to your hotel will actually drop you at the end of the tour. And so that's how we treat them cruelly.
Yeah.
But it just makes it's a bit of fun. But you want people just to, in a way, to fall in love with Liverpool. And most Beatles fans, particularly the Americans, all they've seen of Liverpool is what Brian projected in the 60s.
Yeah.
And it's the black and white film. You remember that the Pier Head was still all black, sooty buildings before it all got cleaned up. And they just think, we're a dirty industrial port city. And they come in and go, wow, parks. And I said, yeah, we got trees. And I'm sorry, we actually do full colour as well. We're not just in black and white. And then they see the architecture. And they're actually stunned at how beautiful Liverpool is. So quite often somebody would come here, maybe just for the day. And particularly the ones who they'll travel to London and maybe they'll come up to Liverpool for a day. And they'll say, I wish we'd done it the other way around. I said, I wish we'd had 2 or 3 days up in Liverpool because there's so much to see. So that's a privilege to do because then we get to sell our city.
Yeah.
And people get to find out what a great city it is. And, there was actually a Liverpool before 1964. The Beatles didn't say, this little port city nobody's heard of, we'll make it famous. And they said, no, we've got 800 years of history.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we were one of the most important commercial ports in the world. Oh. And then you start telling them the history of Liverpool. Yeah. Okay, we get the point. I'm just making sure you understand. So you've got to be proud of the city, haven't we?
We have. Well, it's been great talking to you, David. Absolutely fantastic. And yeah, you also do a podcast as well, don't you?
Yeah, I've got a podcast called Liddypod. Best thing to do is to find out the links to all the stuff I do is my website, davidabedford.com. And that'll take you to a little bit of biography, all the books that I've done, the documentary, podcast, tours, everything. There's links to everything on there. And then that'll give you something to do and get some presents in for Christmas. So, yeah. Yeah, no, it's been fun. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. Hopefully I'll see you around in Liverpool one day.
See you right, mate. We're up for that.
Thank you very much.
See you.
Bye now.
And we're back. So, did you enjoy your little chat?
I certainly did. Did you enjoy it?
I don't know because I've not edited it yet. But when this comes out, I would have listened to it. But it's good, yeah.
Now that you haven't listened to it, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, brilliant chat. You don't need me anymore.
Enjoyed it because of the fact I'm a Beatles fan. Consider myself a little bit of a Beatles expert, and it's always good to learn something new. Yeah.
So what stood out to you, in the chat? Seeing as I've not gone through and edited it yet.
What stood out was there's a bit in it. I mean, can I say it now? Or
yeah, because they've already listened to it.
Oh, that's fine. I did this bit out then.
What? You don't need to?
No, because you don't need to hear me rambling on like this.
All right, okay. Okay.
There was the bit about the Beatles actually went through 26 drummers.
All right.
And counting before Ringo eventually joined them.
Oh, that's a lot, isn't it?
It's a lot.
Jesus.
And I never knew that.
So, do you reckon we can get one of them drummers on? That was the Beatles.
It would be interesting if we could get someone on.
One of the ones that are not
actually,
successful.
It might be worth reaching out to Dave to see if anybody who knew the Beatles or one of them drummers maybe.
Who were the drummers to it? Surely researched in. He's drummer, Beatles.
He has spoke to these guys.
Was it?
Yeah.
So, just type in Beatles drummer on Instagram and guarantee if there was a former Beatles person, you would put it in your bio.
I certainly would, yeah.
So...
But again, as well, when they went into the studio for the first time, that they had a session drummer instead of having Ringo to record Love Me Do. And Dave Bedford has spoken to that guy.
All right.
And Andy White, I think it is. Yeah. Alan White.
I suppose if you specialise in one topic, though, you probably are going deeper and deeper and start talking to the bigger people.
Well, like you said, he's in the middle of doing a documentary as well.
Yeah.
And speaking to people
surrounding
who was involved with the Beatles at some point in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, so you see, we don't specialise in anything, so I don't think we'll ever get the bigger stars in that field.
We need to start specialising in something, don't we?
Nah, I like it the way it is. It mixes it up, doesn't it? So, yeah, we'll just do a bit of acting, bit of music, bit of this, bit of that, bit of that. Eventually we get there.
Nice eclectic.
It might be, I thought you said a clap dick. What did you say?
Eclectic.
Oh, right.
Eclectic mix of guests.
Oh, yeah, it's better. I prefer it. Mixes it up. You never know what you're going to get, do you?
You never know who's listening.
Yeah, exactly. Well, our one and only listener, Yorkie Port, he says he likes that. He likes the fact that we mix it up.
That's good.
So, yeah.
It's nice to have our listener.
It is our one listener. We used to have two. What happened to him?
I don't know. Whatever happened to him?
I don't know.
Oh.
Gone. Unless he's still listening.
Maybe he comes back when Dan comes back.
Maybe missing Dan.
Maybe that's what it is.
Well, Dan will be back soon. We don't know how long for, but yeah. I don't know what we're going to do with mics in regards to Dan. We're going to have to go and buy one or something. I don't know.
I don't know.
I've got a karaoke mic, like I said. I don't know how it works. I don't know what the sound quality is like.
Well, just give it a try.
I can put a pop filter on it. We've got spare ones, haven't we, with these?
Yeah.
Don't know if it'll fit, but
you try it.
we can make it like a good mic.
Just get a lump of foam and stick it on top.
Yeah, should be exciting. Anyway, that's all from us. That's
yeah.
End of it. Yeah. End of episode 25, is it?
It's 25 or 26.
God, we're so unprepared in this. It's such a confusing episode.
Wasn't 26 was the Dart US, wasn't it?
No, we're not done 26 yet. I just don't know if it's 24 or 25 this. Let's find out. 25, I want to say. No, 24. This is episode 24.
Oh, okay.
So, who's 25?
The 25 is the Darts.
That's right. Right, that makes sense. And then we need to do 26, who we've got no guest for yet. But there's loads
Oh, I
on.
thought we had someone lined up.
No.
Oh, okay.
Got no one now.
Well, you better get someone.
We've got loads we're talking to.
Well, you better get someone, haven't you?
We just need to hook one up for that episode. But we'll be recording 26 before 25. 27 before 26.
Okay.
Because I want the 27 to be with Dan. So.
This is getting confusing.
It is, yeah. Yeah. But anyway, that's all from us. We're rambling on now.
That's all from me. That's all from him.
It is indeed.
Thank you for listening.
Reach out.
Here we go. Reach out to us if you've got anything to say. You can contact us on...
Oh, I thought you were going to jump in.
Yeah.
Contact us on www.getfact.co or email us at contact@getfact.co.
Perfection. That's nice. Yeah, so cheddar for now. Is that a word? Cheddar. What was that word that I thought was made up the other day? And
brung.
Brung, yeah. Spell like brung on when you write it. It looks weird. I don't know why.
It sounds weird.
I've never wrote brung.
I haven't. Sounds like something a kid would say.
Yeah, brung it home. Yeah. Is it the something for bring in it? What's it called? I don't know.
I don't know what the
objective for. I don't know. I'm not an English teacher. I'm rubbish.
If there's an English teacher out there listening, get in touch.
It's brung a real word. Right. Bye. See you later.
Music.